Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, Ronnie Moore, today. And normally we just have my guy, Jessie, co-hosting with me on screen. But we've got a whole mess of guys on our podcast today because today is the College Bassmaster Prospect list. We put out a gallery and a list of anglers the other day. And guys, you can all end up chiming in on this. But we tried, this was an idea brought up by, I believe, Kyle and some others in Birmingham about we needed to kind of have like an all-American type prospect list of teams that have done well, will look to do well, projecting who might do well this season and kind of letting the fans know, hey, there's 275 teams per tournament, but here's 25, we're going to try to bracket this field and show you a couple teams to keep your eye out for. Maybe seeing the next Lewis Monetti, seeing the next Tristan McCormick, seeing the next whoever it is from the college series. So Kyle, I'm glad that you did this list. This is the second year that we did this, and we still haven't made everyone in the world happy, but I think that we're getting a well-rounded list overall.
Yeah, making everybody happy is just never going to happen. Two early on thoughts. One, kind of the general idea branched from, I'm a big baseball fan, and in baseball, all your minor league teams, have your prospect list. So the Texas Rangers will have their top 30 prospects, top whatever prospects. Well, it's gotten to the point with the Bassmaster Elite Series where you're talking about, a fifth of the anglers basically are college anglers. So, they're all coming from the college series, making their way to the Elite Series. So, it just seemed like a reasonable thing to do was to make a prospect list. Like, here's the guys, you need to keep your eye on. The second part of that is, like you mentioned, this list is not the end-all be-all. It's not. It's bottom line, it's really not. Decker wrote a follow-up story, which we're going to do again this year. All the guys we missed. Big Lou is the perfect example of this being true. We didn't put him on the list last year, but he didn't. Maybe he cried about it behind closed doors, but he went out and he did something about it. So this list is not a permanent list. If you prove that you're one of the best college anglers, then it is what it is. But this is the people that we project to do the best.
And to introduce everyone on the podcast today, myself, Ronnie Moore, Kyle Jessie as well. Beside Kyle is Chase Sansom. He fished at Marshall University in West Virginia the last few years and has joined the Bassmaster staff. Everybody knows in the bottom left corner of the screen, Chris Decker, he has wrote most of the stories related to college fishing, a lot of kayak coverage as well. And he's traveled around for, higher level events with Bassmaster as well. He's actually from my neck of the woods. Who knew that probably we were 15 minutes from each other my entire college life. And I didn't even know Chris Decker at that time. I move and then we know who he is now. And then Lewis Monetti, our most recent College Classic bracket qualifier to the Classic, looking to make some big waves there, and he'll be fishing the Opens, representing UNC Charlotte and the whole college series for 2023. Chris, Kyle was talking about this, the follow-up story. I'm glad that we didn't knock everybody out of the park and nail it 100%. There are always surprises, and it's always good to see that, and Lewis being one of them. I don't know if we gave Lewis a chip on his shoulder because of it, but circumstances, Lewis fishing solo, Lewis fishing with a lot of different teammates in years prior, those stats and finishes are skewed and it's hard to dial it in, but you see flashes from an angler here, flashes from an angler there, and you're like, well, maybe if they fish all four, or if they fish a few, they can put it together and make a run at it. So who are some names that we now know that we didn't even talk about last year, that when you were writing that story, you're like, man, this was a guy who impressed in 2022 that we definitely will keep an eye on this year as well?
Well, Lewis, for one, obviously we've gone over that pretty extensively, but there are teams that don't necessarily knock it out of the park, but are very consistently hitting those top 20, top 50 marks. And when you've got fields of 225, you don't always recognize the top 50 guys, but when you have field sizes that big, the top 50 finish is fantastic. Like, so some of those teams that hit those marks consistently, they just consistently kind of fly under that radar until Lewis Monetti wins the bracket, or Andrew Vereen and Connor Cartmel win the national championship. That was one team. They didn't last year's national champions didn't fish all the events, but once they did, They struggle a little bit at Saginaw, which is kind of understandable for two kids from South Carolina. But then they go to Logan Martin and qualify for the national championship and win the national championship, and from there have a pretty respectable showing in a pretty tough bracket event. So those are two off the top of my head from last year that we kind of didn't see coming necessarily. But I have to say, overall, we did our list last year. We hit on pretty much everybody. I would say I mean, what was it, Kyle? 24 or 23 or 24 of the 25 we had on last year's list made the national championship.
That's the best way I remember it. I think we missed 2 or 3 that didn't make it for, you know, a variety of different reasons. But no, I mean, that definitely happens. But yeah, I mean, we got we gave ourselves some credit when we had Lewis on the first time. Overall, the list was pretty accurate. We missed some big ones, you know, obviously Lewis being the biggest one, but you know, I'm sure the same will be said for this year. I think without a doubt, a lot of these guys are going to make the national championship, and there may be some that don't, and there'll be some guys that surprise us. It's inevitably going to happen again.
And here's the thing about fishing in general too, and I'll let Ronnie or Lewis say their piece about it. There are just so many factors in bass fishing that you like. For one, you're dealing with a live animal. Like, it's so difficult in fishing. Like, I mean, we have so many, even in the Elite Series, all of those guys deserve to be there. But I mean, you're dealing with a live animal on top of 7 cold fronts that come through during a tournament in Florida, or ice cold conditions that I don't remember what Lake Norman was like for the college anglers last year, but I think it was pretty brutal if I remember correctly. So there's just so many factors that you can't always accurately predict. But as you see, a lot of the top anglers will persevere through that, and I mean, that's where you get those consistent finishes from, the anglers who find a way through those tough conditions.
We even see it in the Elite Series when there's 100 boats and they're boat 80 and they're already down in the dumps because they know that their first 2 spots might be occupied before they get there. When you have a 225, 250, 275 boat field, college anglers may only have a plan A. They don't have a B, C, and D. So when they only have a plan A, running to their first spot and having, you know, another school there is not always the best. But I know when I was in school, FLW did the All-Americans, you know, and it was always like teammates who fished in every event together. And I fished with so many different people like Lewis did, and I fished solo in some of them. And I was like, dude, I can beat that Northern team. They fished in 2 events and they're in their home state. Like, I can beat them. And we never, you know, you always wonder that. So Lewis, last year when we made the prospect list, you know probably how you reacted, or other people at tournaments probably chirping about it. Yeah, I'll show them. Is that what an angler, that's what drives an angler? I mean, a little extra, because we always want to do well, but was that a big talking point, just us making a simple story in a gallery about some guys who know how to catch bass?
Oh, dude, without a doubt. And I think the reason why I'm here today is that so I can't be the guy next year that you know. Yeah, I think what happened was I kind of guilted y'all a little bit. So it's like, all right, let's see if you can pick some good ones, and you know, kind of put me in y'all's shoes, so I'm subject to ridicule in the future. But no, I'm excited to be here and do this. And no, it absolutely did light a fire under me. I remember sitting in the Harris. I think it came out a little bit later last year. This year, you guys let it out like a week or so prior to the tournament. And last year, I think it was like one of the last. Yeah. And I remember sitting in bed the night before the tournament being like, okay, let's see.
And then there was probably people on the list that were like, we're not on jack crap at the Harris chain, and we're on this list. This is not good. Yeah, I'm worried.
The best part is to y'all's credit, I think my partner Michael and my other buddies sitting in the hotel room probably looked at me and were like, dude, you really think you should be on that list? But I guess I thought so, and that's what mattered. So
that's funny. Well, guys, let's jump into it. You know, we had 27 teams on that list overall, you know, and we tried to keep it. We would love to do 35. We could have did 40, but we want to keep it around that 10% mark. We have 275 teams in the tournaments. 27 is about 10%. And that's what we care about. 100 anglers in the Elite Series. You care about the top 10 in AOY. At a certain point, top 25 is awesome, but you're getting down in a bigger percentage of people. You want to be in that top echelon percentage. And so we picked about 10%. And of those 27 teams, it could be debatable at a certain point. You're splitting hairs when you get lower, but I'd say there was probably about 6 or so unanimous teams, ones that if we threw the name out there, we all like threw a thumbs up about, and there was no conversation, no debate, didn't have to look up stats about. So let's go into the 6 unanimous teams, and then we'll go, round robin around all of us to pick out, another 4 or 5 teams that we thought about as well, and maybe fought for, when we did this, call a couple of weeks ago. So the 6 unanimous teams that I kind of pitched out there to Kyle was like, when we were talking about it, we didn't really have many arguments with these. And I'll list off a few, and then I'll throw it over to Kyle a little bit. But when you look at the 6 unanimous, I put Tucker Smith and Hayden Marbett in there from Auburn. Tucker, speaks for himself, all that he's done in college, making the bracket, almost winning the bracket, doing so well outside of college fishing as well. Hayden was his teammate the last year they won the championship, I believe. So he kept that three-peat going for high school. Oh, did he win 2 of them with him or 2 with Grayson?
I thought it was 2, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, well, either way, Tucker won 3 championships, and Hayden was a part of either 1 or 2 of those with him. And now they finally get to fish together at Auburn. Logan Parks has graduated and moved on to the EQ, the Bassmaster Opens EQ. Tucker and Hayden are competing together at Auburn. Got to put them on the list, I feel. Big things, as long as they fish and can get in the tournaments, big things for them. The Messer twins, I'll say this. You mentioned it, Chris. There were some teams that popped up that we didn't necessarily talk about on the list. I personally thought there were some schools that popped up that we didn't know much about before. Schools like Emmanuel College, with what Pam Martin Wells, I believe, is doing down there. I think she's the coach. Is that correct? And then you have Kentucky Christian popping up with a couple teams as well that did well throughout the year, and including a win there. Both those teams and universities were represented at the top of the Harris chain last year. And then you even have like some of the community colleges like Catawba Valley, just, really kind of making a push towards it in the North Carolina region. There's a lot of new schools popping up. Lander has been around for a while, but they're really, now that they have a coach, there's a lot of teams that are developing. So Leif and Matt Messer coming out of the chutes firing. And I believe, Chris, you mentioned it. Are they splitting a schedule? Are they also, are they trying to fish the Opens as well as college?
I believe they are both in the EQ, which, looking at the schedule, I really don't know how that's going to work out for them, unfortunately, but good for them for really, trying to do both, getting as much experience in there as possible. And one thing about their win last year, the Harris chain, is, I think they're both kind of shallow water anglers. So for them to go out there and put a Carolina rig in their hand and go to work on some Florida largemouth was pretty impressive.
100%, especially because just the way it works out. There was 2 teams fishing for first place. It was a second tournament going on, and Bethel won that second tournament with, third and beyond. Another team in the unanimous, we've mentioned 2 with Smith and Marbett from Auburn, the Messer brothers from Kentucky Christian. I think Ben Culley and Hayden Gaddis from Carson Newman, they were almost a unanimous last year. And then, they showed those flares and different things. And it's so hard to tell how people will fish well together. This guy might fish well by himself, this guy might fish well, but then 2 dominant people fishing together, will it be hard to balance the decision making? But Chase, we see Carson Newman, that's a school that's risen up the rankings with Hunter Sales as their coach. That duo, though, Ben and Hayden, if you take 2 guys who know what they're doing and put them together, and no conflicts probably from what we've seen, and just good finishes, you fished against them as well. But that East Tennessee team, they're fantastic, and they travel well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those 2 guys are ones you got to watch out for sure. Multiple top 10 finishes last year. 5th in AOI in 2021, and they won the college classic.
Well, they won at Hartwell as well.
Yeah, that
college classic at the
classic, yeah.
Not the bracket, but yeah, we have that, like the kayak, and we have the college during the classic. So yeah, I didn't even think of that as one of their accolades, but that is always a who's who because everyone wants to get invited to that, and they'll travel. Like I had people from North Carolina that were like, I'll go to Ray Roberts if you guys need someone to come to Texas. Like I'll go just to be a part of that. So yeah, it is cool to see that as a win. And Kyle, the last three on our unanimous list, it was kind of a little bit more of a debate how we go about this, but to put it in perspective, we had Will Davis on the podcast, the past podcast, and we said that's the hardest way to make it to the classic or the elites is through the nation. There's so many anglers from so many tournament trails to make it there, to win the championship or get top three and make it. That's such a feat. Same thing can be said for all of the colleges, all of the regionals, all the championship drama, and then making it to the bracket. We have to give the comeuppance and a due to the teams that just make the championship or to make the bracket. And that kind of rounds out our last three teams, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about the bracket, you don't get there by accident. And, you look at somebody like Trey Schroeder, Lane Stevens, they're going to be fishing together. Trey has fished the bracket 2 different occasions. I mean, there is a very short list of people that have fished the bracket 2 different occasions. You look back to like the Jordan Lees and Matt Lees of the world, and that's like the only other guys I can really think of off the top of my head.
Whitaker.
Yeah, and Jake, yeah.
Elites, so, they're all pros.
Exactly. So you got to put a little bit of emphasis there. Of course, Lane Stevens is a Oklahoma guy, I believe. Good buddies with Jake Peck, who is in that Tulsa area, fished with Bo Browning last year. So that team has a lot of promise.
And I will say, I'll give some love to Tyler Christie. He has now since moved on from the college series, but he is one who made all of the, all the money with Trey, those two. So we had to put Trey in there, and we're just saying, hey, Lane, no pressure, bud. You got some shoes to fill in that boat for the year that they get to fish.
Tyler and Trey, if you had a bass fishing dictionary and you had the word consistency, put those two their picture right next to it, because every tournament seemed like they were in contention.
I'll add on them too real quick. That's 2 that they made the bracket in. They made another day 3 at the Natty. They've made 3 top 12s in 4 Natties. That is unbelievable.
And I'll say also that consistency, Chris, that translates well to the next level, to the Opens, to the Elite Series, to whatever they fish. But there are those anglers, and Lewis knows this, Greg Hackney may not show consistency at times. He is still a top tier angler, but like not top 20 in AOI this year. But when you go head to head with someone like him on the final day, or a 1v1, or, there's 2 guys with a big lead and he's the other guy, just like Brock Mosley said about Jason Christie, like I'm leading at Chickamauga, but I got that dude like right behind me. There are those guys that when you go one-on-one with them, it doesn't matter how inconsistent they've been. It's hard to beat them. And so Trey and Tyler haven't won as many first round matchups to make the semis. Tyler made the semis this past year for the bracket. And basically what I'm saying is that even though they haven't made the semis every time, or they haven't made the finals at all, Tyler and Trey's consistency doesn't necessarily translate well to a 1v1 catch all you can catch that day weight-wise to advance type of deal. Where I feel like Lewis's style, he could be consistent, but man, when it was I got to catch 15 pounds today, I got to catch 13 pounds today, like there was no laying up. He took his Carolina rig spot and threw it out the window and said, I got to fish docks. And so it's hard to balance, man. It's comfortable getting bites and being consistent, but man, sometimes you just got to go with, I got to catch 5 fish. I got to get 5 bites and hope they're the right weight. So Kyle, there's 5 teams right there. And the last team I was super impressed with, I knew one of the guys' names from way back. I didn't even know that he decided to go to college, because he was an 18-year-old who was leading a Bassmaster Open in Florida a few years ago. And I was like, is this the next dude, Jackson Swisher? So when I saw Jackson and Seth fish at Florida Gateway, make the final day of the championship, and then make the bracket, I was like, man, these boys in Florida, if you have any kind of, I'm a state champion, I'm a college winner, I'm a Opens leader, and I'm a kid from Florida, those kids have the most opportunity to fish, and they have probably fished. It's like Alabama. They have fished against some hammers in their local scene. And Kyle, Jackson Swisher, Seth Slanker are around at our unanimous list.
Yeah, no, those 2 definitely have to be on there. They were on the list last year. They were one of the teams that proved us right. I think Lewis is still feeling the pressure from the bracket. He
had to beat them both. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
That's one of those that has to be unanimous, because like I said, we put them on there last year for, their history of finishes. And obviously this year came out and had an impressive season again. So seeing their names on the list again, that's an easy unanimous decision.
Well, guys, do you have any other statements about the unanimous 6 teams that we have? All of them, their stats speak for themselves, but it's also a good projection for this season. I mean, the schedule, some of the events are similar that we've had. I think 2 of them at least have been on the schedule last year. And then we've got some different rivers that come up, and so I'm interested to see how some of these boys do. I think the schedule sets up great for Florida Gateway College. I think those guys could be the team of the year if they can catch smallmouth up north, and if they decide to fish all of them. But there are some teams that don't show up on all 4 or 5 of the college results each year. Some of these teams, they do their job. They qualify in the first one, and we don't see them till the championship. But if they fish 2 events, they showed up in those 2 events. Or there's some teams that fished all of them, and they're in the team of the year race, and that's why they make the list. So, Chase, why don't you start us off and give us, we all kind of have 4 or 5 teams added on to the unanimous 6 that fill out our full lineup of prospects. Give us half your list. Give us 2 teams off the top that that you had to put in consideration, or that you were like totally on board with putting them in our list.
Yeah, so my first 2 teams, the first one is the Minnesota duo that actually attend school down here in Montevallo, about 30 minutes away. It's Easton Fothergill and Nick Donkey. Kind of had a rocky start last year, the first three tournaments, I believe, and they really got it turned around when they went up north to Saginaw and qualified for the national championship. And so I look for those guys to, kind of bounce back this year and really, have a good season moving on. The other two I have are new guys coming on to the college series this year. Right out of high school is Dylan and Carter Nutt. They're brothers, and they're attending the University of North Alabama. So I'm looking forward to seeing those guys do well. They've had some success in the high school ranks. I believe I have here a 3rd place in the 2021 national championship for Bassmaster. So we'll see how they do, and I'm sure they'll do fine.
Well, I'm excited to see UNA on this list again, and I don't want to play favorites, but like during my time back in the day, since I'm an oldie and I'll be 30 this year, back in my day, UNA was the public school version of Bethel. I mean, there was 4 or 5 teams. You knew their names. They showed up everywhere. We went a little bit of a time with not knowing many people. Actually, one of the teams made the championship, and the bracket after the Harris Chain event that Cole Sands and Connor DeMarle won. We had a UNA team make the bracket. Both of them lost out in the first round, I believe. But that, other than that, it's been quiet since I graduated. That's the one big thing. So I'm excited to see some more talent come to UNA. Not that there wasn't talent, but maybe these guys who have fished together and know each other so well can translate and bring UNA back to prominence, because they were one of the best public school clubs out there before scholarships got really popular.
Speaking of that, Murray State was another one that was up there, and we had there was a team, forgive me for not remembering their names, that did really well in the 2021 national championship. But since then, maybe with Kentucky Lake kind of coming back to having a resurgence here lately, we'll see more Murray State teams get back into it. But Murray State was another one that was like 100%. Really dominant at the start of college fishing, and I'd like to see them kind of get back into the national spotlight here.
100%. And that's also, those teams took advantage of the opportunities. Kentucky Lake was a huge tournament lake for college the last decade or so, and it's been lesser and lesser the last 2 or 3 years. Same with Pickwick. That was always the wild card. That was always a high school championship. Some of these big lakes have to have these big fields on them. So they took advantage of the opportunities to win at home or to do well, and then it traveled and carried for them. So Decker, why don't you give me 2 of your teams as well, off the top of your list?
Yeah, so the Adrian College team of Hayden Scott and Gerald Brumbaugh, I think if Griffin Fernandez hadn't moved on and graduated, I think they would have been right there at unanimous. But I mean, Scott and Fernandez won the 2021 Bassmaster National Championship on the St. Lawrence River, obviously highlighting the smallmouth prowess that Adrian College has in general. So I mean, having a national champion on your team to start with is a big plus in their favor. But then you've got Gerald, who, I mean, if you look at his MLF high school stats, I mean, they're pretty phenomenal. 7 top 10s overall, a national championship at Lake Hartwell. So I think this is going to be a really well-rounded team with national championship pedigree on both the college and high school side. So kind of veteran and rookie coming together here. And I think they'll be super competitive. And I mean, looking at this year's schedule, we haven't really like talked about the schedule as a whole yet. Harris Chain, that'll be kind of a wild card for them. I think I don't remember how Hayden's done in Florida before, but then you've got Cherokee, which will be a smallmouth event most likely. You got some largemouth mix in there too, but a smallmouth venue, which I think they'll excel at. Then you've got 2 rivers, James River and Red River, where they've got, I mean, Hayden's got river experience, so I think they could do really, really well at those 2 events too, depending on how it sets up. So definitely don't, just because Griffin's gone, don't sleep on that Adrian College team. And then 2 freshmen from UNA. We've got Nathan Reynolds and Banks Shaw. Shaw won the high school national championship at Chickamauga a couple of years ago. They caught 20 pounds and 11 ounces. Him and Gage King with 3 fish, 3 largemouth. And they said they could have had like 28 or 29 for their best 5. So a little bit of a home lake advantage there, but still, I mean, catching a 20-pound bag with 3 fish is pretty wild. And
huge
then
comeback
Reynolds,
to win too. They weren't leading.
Yeah,
they were behind by a good bit. Yeah.
Yeah, they barely made they've snuck through on the cut line and then came back and won the whole thing. So that was a pretty impressive performance from them. Reynolds finished 6th at last year's national championship on Hartwell, and they're both Bassmaster All-Americans. So it may take a minute for them to get their footing. As freshmen, you never know how you're going to run the boat by yourself until you actually kind of get out there and do it. But All-American pedigree, they both fished the Tennessee Bass Nation side of things, which is one of the most competitive youth programs in the country right now. So, I mean, I think they'll be, if not this year, next year and the years beyond, they'll be right there competing for national championships and brackets.
And just to add on that a little bit, so just a side note to that, Nathan's dad, Chris, was one of my boat drivers at Gunnersville. Wouldn't have been last year, but the year before. And I got the chance to talk to Nathan then, and he would have been, I guess, a junior in high school. And the kids definitely got it. I mean, Chris said the same thing after getting to speak to him, at the high school championship. But he's one of those that I could see that step not really being so drastic. Because I think he fishes a lot of stuff by himself, even as a high school kid.
He fished Alabama Bass Trail too. So I mean, we all know, anybody who's plugged in knows how tough the Alabama Bass Trail is. So,
or they like losing either way. They like winning against a big competition, or they like losing because that's not easy. Yeah. Kyle, is Chris Reynolds the same Chris Reynolds that would send in photos to Bassmaster.com? Is that the same Chris Reynolds? Because he was like a 4th photographer. I was like, thank God he's taking photos of this championship with me, because I was like, I didn't even know. And I was like, thanks for the photos. So that's awesome that they're that involved as well in the high school and college series, that the dad shows up just to contribute to the coverage.
Yeah, and it was also a little frustrating because I could tell, being in the boat with him, he knew a lot about photography, and I was like, why don't you just take the photos and I'll run the boat? I think we got the roles backwards here, buddy. But no, good people, and I could definitely see him making a splash even in his first year.
I like seeing a couple freshmen out of your first 2 teams. 75% of the guys you mentioned, Decker, were freshmen, and it's hard to project that. It really is, if they're ready, or we see those guys who just click from the beginning. And Lewis, you mentioned a couple weeks ago some young guys on the UNC Charlotte team that clicked immediately, and you were like, they've got it. They don't got it as good as I do, but they got it. And so tell me about, you have to have a UNC Charlotte team or 2 on your list out of our 27.
I absolutely do. And I might have said they might got it better than me. my first one's got to be my buddy Jake Monty and Sam Dunson. So Jake last year was a freshman, and Sam, it was his first year fishing college series. And you can go check the stats. I'm not going to have the stats to rattle off with the rest of these guys like I do them because I followed so closely. But I believe they 13th or 14th Norman this past year. They top 10 the Natty at Winyah. They came in, I think, 50th at Saginaw, but they also fished 2 MLF events and top 15 both of those. I think top 5 Sam Rayburn, which it was his first time ever being there. The kid has it. He kind of is an under the radar guy like myself. Didn't really fish much in high school and just kind of showed up. And the first time I met him, kind of like Kyle said about Nathan Reynolds, when you talk to somebody who's got it, you just kind of know.
You can tell.
I remember, the first time I sat down and talked with Jake, I knew. And Sam, his partner, is, you want to talk about a guy that can catch him behind you, he ain't going to leave any. So them two, look out for him. They're going to catch him. And then I got to throw Michael in there. Michael's fishing with my buddy Bryson. Man, they're both my 2 roommates. So I think I'd kind of get, attacked in the middle of the night if I didn't really put them on there. But no, Bryson, he's had a struggle on the college series thus far. He's a junior right now. It's kind of been a tough go for him. But in high school, he ran the North Carolina Trail. He went down to, I think it was the TBF Natty at Pickwick. And it was like that was when they had like 370 boats. And I think top 20 that. The kid's got it. He's got to figure out in his head. But I think Michael, as he proved with me this year, he can kind of bring the best out of a partner. And I think those 2 guys together will definitely make their Bryson's first national championship showing. And hopefully, who knows, maybe a little back-to-back Charlotte bracket.
That's the one thing I was concerned about. And I'll be completely honest, and Michael can call me later, but it's all in love. But when you have a guy who's a known boater, and it's not a declassification if you're a co-angler or if you fish on the back of the boat. I mean, that is how I grew up and ran. But like, you were the captain of the boat, like when it was tournament time. But I don't know how practice goes. I don't know how formulating a pattern goes. I've had partners before where they're like, you know what, I'm good with whatever you say. And so it's all on me. So I feel really good if we do well. I feel really bad if we don't. For you and Michael, it seemed like you were the boat captain, but he probably contributed a lot. And so our probably reasoning, at least my reasoning of not putting him in the unanimous aspect, is don't know about his new partner, how apt to being the leader of the boat he is, or if Michael has the ability to step up and be that leader of the boat and he can take the old Michael role, Bryson can. So can you give us some insight on that? And if Michael, I can send him my address, but I hope he doesn't want to come fight me now. But it's an unknown thing for, Justin Atkins and Grant Galloway fish together. Grant was the co-angler out of those 2, technically. Grant's a freaking stick and fishes professionally as well across the country, but Justin happens to be a cup winner in an elite series. You just don't know how good that translates to the front. And we see that in some guys, but some guys it doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think Michael would probably not fight you on that and agree with you. But he also is good at not giving himself enough credit. And he's a great co-angler. And while you're absolutely right, it is, there typically is kind of the 1-2 aspect in the boat. To have a 2 that isn't, just kind of back there dragging around, not really contributing, that doesn't help either.
1B. It's a 1B.
Yeah. And there's no denying, look, I fished for college in college for 3 years. I made a couple national championships, had my opportunities, but never did anything that would show you guys that I would do what I did last year. And I think one of the primary reasons why I did that was having Michael in the boat with me. And I've seen that same kind of potential out of Bryson to he doesn't have the same kind of consistency team of the year vibe that I do, but I'm not going to be surprised at all if they roll up to a Cherokee or a James River and pop a top 5, because Bryson's that kind of guy who swings a big stick. He could catch a big bag. And I think them 2 together, I think Michael will really elevate his game and put him in the national championship.
That's
Michael
awesome.
deserves to be on the list just simply for riding in the Ranger with you with the seat quality.
Yeah.
Survive 4 tournaments.
Agreed.
At least he can get.
Yeah, the scars that he has in places that we don't want to see. I mean, oh my goodness. Well, that's great. And it's a great conversation to have. That's the reality of it. I mean, when you get to the Alabama Bass Trail, like you said, you got two anglers and they both probably fish on their own in the front of the boat. And then they come together as a stud team. In college, that's a toss up. I'm gonna jump into my two if you're good with your thoughts on your UNC Charlotte boys. And we allowed Lewis, there were good, valid reasons, but we did allow him to dip into the pool of his knowledge, and his knowledge was Niner Nation. So
a little more too.
Yeah, a little bit. There's a couple more coming. We wanted to just get the homer out of the way early in the podcast.
I can definitely back up his two selections there. So yeah, I mean, Jake really impressed at the national championship. So I mean, I think they'll have just as good or even better season this year too. So
that's fantastic to hear. I'm going to go with mine, and I'm going to pull out two totally opposite teams. It's the Bethel's back, and then they only took an off season off, according to us. We didn't put any Bethel teams on the prospect list for 2021. Heard it from people on social. Maybe we put that or the 2022 list. We put that chip on their shoulder, and boy, did they come out the gates firing with 9 and 10 pounders at the Harris chain and a top 3 finish. And so I'm going to give my first team is Levi Mullins and Matthew Cummings. Bethel is an interesting school. Gary Mason has aligned a lot of great anglers over the years. We talked to Will Davis in the last podcast. He was there with Dewey Swims, Cody Ross, Matt Roberts, Zach Parker. The guy, I'm surprised none of them fish professionally. And then we get the John Garrett's and the Cody Huffs and the Cole Floyds and all of that group of guys, Tristan McCormick's that fished together the last 5 years or so. And then there was a gap. It was all of those guys left at the same time, and we just didn't know many names. There were some transfers out as well that are now at other schools. Like, we just didn't know the names. And it's like the freshmen, the uncomfortableness, like we don't know unless it's a personal testament. We don't know how good they're going to do. But to see Levi Mullins and Matthew Cummings do well, and one thing I'll also add is that Bethel they don't do the team of the year race and fight. They don't win the Boat US team of the year because they don't fish all the events. They get in, qualify, do their work, and get out, and they don't necessarily travel to all of them. So team of the year, you're not going to see Bethel normally in the top 10 or 20, not because of the ability, just because of the attendance for all of the events. Levi and Matthew got it done in Florida, top 3. Like I said, they won the second tournament where it was Kentucky Christian and Emmanuel competing for the win. And then third and beyond, they won that tournament with 47 pounds and change for 2 days. And so kudos to them. Then they showed up, and I believe they showed up well in the championship. Those were the 2 tournaments that I really saw them in. And let me see, I think they got in the top 10 there as well. Yeah, 9th place and 3rd place for the 2, Bassmaster events they were really together for and performed for. So Levi and Matthew, I think that we may see some good things out of them. You just never know. Like Lewis said, if you get hot, you might not be consistent, but if you get hot in a couple of tournaments and they're the right ones, you can find yourself in the championship. You can find yourself in the bracket. You can find yourself in the Bassmaster Classic. So looking to see the Bethel revival just after a 3-month hiatus from 2021 to 2022. And then this new one is a young kid, but he's well seasoned, just not in the college series yet. And I'm going to go with Caden Tanner from Tarleton State. Right now he's listed as fishing solo. Got a lot on his plate with school and different things that he's doing there. But Caden Tanner, kind of Justin Atkins' protege. He fished as a co-angler with Atkins across the country in the Opens the last few years. Then he jumps to the front of the boat and almost qualifies for the Bassmaster Elite Series in his first shot, just a few points off in qualifying for, a lifelong dream possibly. It would have been interesting to see how he put his actual career aspirations on hold to pursue the Elite Series if that was the case, because he seems much smarter than any of us on screen here based on what he's going to school for. But Caden fishing solo, like Lewis, like I did in past tournaments, fishing by yourself, you just don't know how fishing solo will transfer to college team tournament. But fishing solo in the Opens transferred pretty dang well for Caden Tanner. So I'm gonna go ahead and put him on there. And if I'm wrong, all the people in Texas could just throw tomatoes at me if they weren't picked and I put him on instead. So there's my 2 teams. We got a Bethel and we got a young prodigy. It seems like a really sharp angler. Caden Tanner, and then the Mullins and Cummings duo from Bethel.
I don't think you'll be wrong about Caden. It's just a matter if he can handle vet school on top of
Yeah.
I mean, he was I talked to him for a story for Bassmaster.com at that Lake Hartwell event, and he was running back and forth from exam to practice, back to exam, back to tournament. I mean, his schedule was pretty insane last year, and he came that close to making the Elite Series. So if he can handle everything that goes into vet school and fishing tournaments, then you'll see him do all right.
Kyle, we've tasked you with 5 teams, so give us 2 or 3 to start, and then we'll get your second half on the next part of the round robin.
Yeah, so I'll go three teams this round. In the spirit of Lewis going Homer, I'm going to start Homer as well, and I'm gonna start by saying Bo Browning and Drake Sturgill. So naturally he's a good buddy of mine. We fished a lot together. He's from Hot Springs, same place that I'm from. So I know a lot about Bo, but naturally his results speak for themselves. Big win at Norfolk last year. He was chasing Lewis as much as anybody in Team of the Year until the final event at Saginaw. He kind of stumbled there, but stayed pretty steady in the top 3 all year long, still finished in the top 10. In 2022, I mean, top 35 finishes, I think every event except for, like I said, the Saginaw event, and then 2 top 30s in 2021. So another one of those guys you look at and you think a lot of consistency. And one thing Ronnie made very evident early on is that this is not just Bo Browning and his partner, and he can add on to that a little bit. But Drake comes from North Carolina, right, Ronnie?
Yeah, the Lake Norman region.
Yep.
And
where he's been mentored by Hank Cherry, which is pretty hard to beat, kind of the same way as we've discussed with Caden Tanner and Atkins. But Ronnie can maybe hit on that a little bit more because he knows more about that situation. But right when I heard that, I was like, well, I think that should work just fine.
Yeah, Drake, even his brother Cade, who's still in high school, they're both, and they come from a great family, great support system. And sometimes in college, that's looked down upon. That's looked down upon as, Patrick Walter's dad always at the college events. But dude, Patrick Walter's dad just loves him and just wants him to do well, and he's going to be there if he needs to change a tire, he's going to be there. And so the Sturgill family, just a great family overall. But yeah, getting mentored by Hank Cherry. I mean, I've showed up to shoot some content with Hank for Bassmaster when I'm coming through to visit family. And Drake's like, the garage opens and he's in there like cleaning up all the baits on the floor. And I'm like, is he stealing stuff or is he here? He's supposed to be here. And he's like, oh no, that's Drake. He's just cleaning up. And so he's been around the right people to either listen, learn, or actually be out on the water with. So I'd expect good things from him, even though he hasn't fished. And he had a decision coming out of high school to go to a school that was just forming a fishing team, and he could be the big fish in the small pond and try to take that team to greater levels, or go to a team with high pedigree like Montevallo. So he went and sat last year, I believe, and now he's fishing. And yeah, the way it is, I mean, you just want to find a good partner. I think Drake is cool to chill and not be the guy if Bo is the guy. I mean, there's those times where I'm okay with being 1B if that's my 1A. And so until Drake learns to be the 1A, he's going to learn from a great angler. Bo could go fish solo. He has the same kind of situation fishing opens and stuff before fishing college. I think that Bo, it has if we had an angler of the year, an individual angler that we had to predict one guy to make the Elite Series one day, I think Bo is going to be in the short list of that. So yeah, fantastic duo. But yeah, Drake is not going to be a name that you're going to know, but I mean, he's got a fantastic name for the outdoors in general, and for, I guess, for the sponsors at Montevallo too.
I can add to this too. Ronnie, as you know, I've done a lot of boat captaining for the high school series here in North Carolina. And I've been at a lot of high school tournaments around here, and Drake's the name that you see at the top. So like you said, like Kyle said, it's not going to be a surprise to see him do well.
And carries himself respectfully and humbly, and he's not like me. He's not going to be like, I'm so good. That's what I do normally, and that's why I host this podcast. But he is going to be quietly, the guy who shows up and does his work and goes home.
Yep.
I mean, it goes without saying too, I think that Bo has a pretty good mentor as well. So
Thanks, Dad.
He loves that too. We should harp on that some more. So team number 2. So this is one I was passionate about even being on the list last year. We left them off based on a few different reasons, and they definitely proved us wrong. Was Connor Jacob and Sam Smith from Auburn. 2021 obviously got a win at Smith Lake. A little inconsistent, but showed some bright spots. They're a team that I got to cover on the water. And it's one of those things, kind of like Lewis and I were talking about a second ago. When you just watch those guys, they're fluid. I mean, everything is on point all the time. I mean, they have a lot of fun, but you can just tell watching them, these are not just your average college anglers. And then you saw that this year, obviously 6th and team of the year, had a really good run. I want to say there was only one event they bombed, but they had 4 top 20 finishes, 2 top 10s, and then, like I said, like 100 something. So like one bomb, but I mean, their good finishes are on average way better than pretty much anybody in the field. So those two, I'm super passionate about being good. They're good kids. They're fun to watch, and they are extremely, extremely talented. And another team, one second.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
That like Chase mentioned a minute ago with the Minnesota team moving down to Alabama, they're both ironically from Illinois, which is when I figured that out, I was like, it's so strange to me that they from Illinois were like best friends in high school, fished together, and then went to Auburn, basically as far south as you can go from there, it seems like, and have done extremely, extremely well. And like I said, those guys are guys to look out for as well.
That's not too shabby if the 3 anglers under the age of 80 in Illinois are Trevor McKinney and those 2 fellas. I mean, that's not too bad for 3 guys from Illinois. But how did they get 4 top 20s and 1 bad finish and get 6th in team of the year? That just occurred to me when you said that. How competitive. Oh, wait, say it again.
Right.
The
Natty's one of them.
Yeah. The Natty didn't count.
Oh, okay. I was about to say if they were that good, and I mean, kudos to you, Lewis. You're much better than I thought you were. If that was the case, where they only had 1 bad finish and you still smoked them. So, no, I like those 3, and yeah, the Connor and Sam, I believe. If I hope I didn't say that wrong. Those 2 guys, they were ones that definitely were outspoken, or we were outspoken about in terms of possible unanimous. Chase stuck up for him there, and I said, just show me, prove it to me this year. So we're looking for big things out of that Auburn team. Yeah, it's hard. There's so many good Auburn teams. It's hard to dial in one being better than the other, just like Montevallo.
Yeah, I kind of want to harp on those 2 as well. Like
me too.
For the most part, every time I've ever seen them, they've just been in complete like dirt in the mud, shallow fishing, which should set up pretty well for them this year. But one day I fished the Norman event, and I actually saw them out in the middle of the lake. It was just like weird, like they were out there fishing. I'm like, what are they doing? And so obviously I pull up like thinking maybe they're broke down or maybe they're fishing. I'm like, hey, what are y'all doing? And we're running out of gas. Can you tow us back? And I towed them suckers like 10 miles down the lake. And I think they went on to do pretty well in that tournament.
Top 10 in that one, yeah.
So,
they weren't fishing in the middle of the lake in that tournament, I can agree.
Yeah.
Because of Chase Sansom, they made the list. I now understand why you fought for them. I understand that. Okay. You just you planned this out so you could give yourself some love. I got you.
I could speak to him too. I mean, dude, I remember at Saginaw, the event that we won team of the year at, and I was running like 45, 50 miles to my fish, and they were bed fish. And of course, in my boat, it took 44 years to get there. So I'm freaking going and going and going. And Michael and I are like trying to stay alive. And we get there, and like right on my like 2nd or 3rd waypoint, there they are. I was like, it's over. I got like 7 fish marked, and they're sitting on one of them. I'm done. And luckily, we found one extra one. But like when you see them guys on your hole, it's scary.
No question. Yeah.
Knowing that you're going to have to leave an hour and a half before them, and they'll still make it back to the same time to check in.
I hope you make it in.
Yeah. They had the Coast Guard on speed dial at tournament.
Hey, y'all, just a heads up in case we don't make it. We're the guys with the seats. That's all you need to know.
USA following them out into their hole.
Did you knock out all 3 of your?
No, I got one more. So it's kind of hard to determine of the 5 which one to go next, but last year Parker Guy and Brooks Anderson from Emmanuel did extremely well, top 3 in team of the year. Those guys in themselves, see if I can catch up here. Let's see, 3rd in team of the year, 2 top 10s, never finished outside of the top 35 in a single event. that they fished last year. And I think maybe I don't know, they might have missed the wild card. Obviously didn't have to fish it. And then this year, Tyler Campbell is now fishing with Parker Guy, which is ironic because you don't really have to justify him being a good angler either, because he made the final day of the team championship, bracket fish off, whatever the heck we call that nowadays. But, proved himself just fishing by himself, and then obviously fishing in that tournament naturally on Lake Hartwell, one of his home lakes. But, I think that team, when you look at Brooks and Parker, what they did last year were so consistent and had such a good season. I think I want to say somebody else has Brooks on their list as well, but those guys are the model of consistency last year, and I don't think there's going to be any drop off with Tyler being in the boat either, because like I said, he's obviously proved himself. And I went back and looked, and he had he had some solid finishes as well, a couple top 20s in the last couple of years too. So that should be a team to watch for this year as well.
I don't want to ever discredit someone and their performance for doing it close to home. Like when I had the benefit of having 2 college regionals in the time, we were only allowed to fish our region. Like we couldn't fish all of them. And they happened to be at Norman. The pressure that you feel launching the boat on your home lake or a lake well, when there's so many factors and it's not maybe your time of year. I mean, I was blessed that I got 6th and like 22nd, but I thought I was going to get 87th or 100. Like, you're just so worried that you're going to fail. And we'll see that this year, like at Lay Lake. There's like 6 elite pros that could consider the Coosa or Lay somewhat home. There's going to be 1 or 2 that finish in the 80s. And so to see somebody show up at the team championship, like you were saying, and make the final day and perform well at home, that's the job, and it's the minimum. But man, that is so hard to do the minimum at times, to show up at home that the best, because there's so many things that can distract you.
For sure. And to piggyback off your point, back in our day when that was the case, you got to fish it. I will say I would have traded my home lake
100%.
for Sam Rayburn and Toledo Bend with 1 day of practice apiece.
Yeah. In February when it's freezing, or January. Yeah.
That went about exactly how I would have expected. So I had no expectations. So me finishing down near the bottom was exactly where I thought I'd be. So it can be worse. Trust me.
Chase, give us the rest of your teams. And for those at home listening or joining us on the Inside Bassmaster podcast today, we're doing the college prospect list. We're making, we made the top 27 teams we thought to keep an eye on, or that had performed well previous years. And these are in no rhyme or reason, no order. We kind of divvied up the 20 other than the unanimous, the 21 teams other than the unanimous, and kind of split them out. If we say these guys on this second part of the round robin, that doesn't mean they're lesser than the ones we've mentioned. It's just the way the list split out. So Chase, give me your last 2 out of your 4.
Yeah. Just kind of piggybacking off what Kyle was saying, with Brooks Anderson and Parker Guy. Brooks has formed a new partner with Max Heaton, and so obviously the success that Brooks had, and then coming together with a new partner will be interesting to see. I feel like that should be a pretty good duo. I don't really know like who was if they're both just absolute hammers, or it was kind of like one of those deals where one was kind of carrying the load. But I'll be interested to see. But to kind of piggyback off that, or kind of say off that, Max and Brooks actually just won a big tournament on Clarks Hill, the Clarks Hill Classic. So that should be pretty interesting to see how they do the rest of the season. And then kind of the last 2, I got James Willoughby and Jacob, I think Funt. Is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah. Yep.
Jacob Funt. And those 2 guys actually came together late in the season last year, and kind of had a good run in the wild card, had 11th place there, and then capped it off with a top 12 in the Natty. So interesting to see how they'll do in 2023.
And that's one thing I think that needs to be said too. A lot of these teams, like the Montevallos, the Auburns,
there's the same thing.
There's teams in these schools, or they go to these schools that are equally or as good as these guys on the list. You just have to pick. You have to pick them. I mean, like I mentioned a minute ago, like Jake Peck fishing with Bo Browning. Jake moved to Auburn and is going to fish with Garrett Warren, who was on the list last year. So to be determined how they do. But like there are teams on the list. Montevallo, I mean, you could probably split their team in half, and like half the guys could be on the list reasonably, but you just never, like we said, we just never know which one's going to stand up. But that's one of those teams that has a lot of potential. I know Jacob has fished with Grayson Morrison and a lot of the, the hammers there. So I suspect they would do well for sure.
Decker, yeah, I was about to say the exact same thing that Kyle said, but Montevallos and the Auburns and things like that, they hit the cap. Some of these schools don't send 10 teams. That they send 10 teams. So we have to put in perspective. If they sent 10 teams, they got 10 or more at home that didn't make the cut. So if they're even getting pushed to sign up and do it, and they're the 10, something already has separated them from the pack of their own school, which is like a mini college league already. So, and you know that, Decker, like that there's talent that gets to fish 2 events. They get 1 shot this year, maybe. And that's the one they get to sign up for because there's so much competition within the school.
Oh, for sure. And, along those lines, there's plenty of hammers that are, you kind of separate college fishing into kind of 2 groups. You've got the public school group, and you've got like the scholarship, and then the scholarship group and the kind of the smaller private school group. And I mean, there's plenty of great anglers at that public school level who just can't, like, for any number of reasons that we're not going to dive into here. They just don't have the same opportunity to fish every single Bassmaster event or every single whatever league they choose to fish. They don't have the same opportunity to fish all the tournaments. So there's that's when you've got 225 Bassmaster teams plus probably another 225 who fish elsewhere. I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's
a big player pool. Yeah,
there's great anglers everywhere. So
when we do see the public schools succeed, Kyle, I know we're over here like one of us. A
bunch of public school fishermen in one podcast talking about public and private school. But one thing to mention, and Decker made a great point, because that really is true. And I think that maybe the majority of people out there may not even realize there's that distinction between the two, between resources, availability to go to these tournaments and things. But you look at the Elite Series, and Ronnie would be as equipped as I would to name who they are. But there were some of those guys that made it from the college ranks that didn't do anything in college. Like, they wouldn't have been on our prospect list.
I'm not naming them.
I'm not either. But, like, that's just the truth. So that just shows how, like, how much talent there is top to bottom that would be the case. And I can remember, like, even myself fishing in college, I didn't put a ton of merit into it because you have to kind of realize, like, sometimes you just don't have the ability that some of the other schools that have been there for 2 weeks have. Like, it's just, there's differences. I mean, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I wish, I wouldn't trade my college experience for anything, but there was plenty of times where I was at tournaments thinking, well, if I had 2 weeks of practice,
if I just had one more day, if I had a second spot to go to,
whatever, but that doesn't make or break your career. So, I mean, I think there's plenty of public school kids out there that are absolute hammers that may never see the light of day from a podcast like this or the prospect list that could easily go on and do, huge things. So, I mean, I think that's one thing that certainly needs to be mentioned, because we are pretty heavy on the, private school kids on here, but it's mostly because they're at, like Ronnie said, all the events. So they have the biggest pool to look from as far as results go.
And often a lot of these scholarship or private school teams, they are already paired up from freshman year by the coach, and they will fish all 4 years together, or 3 of the 4 years together. So it's name recognition of these guys have been together. We don't have to worry about, is that a new teammate, whatever. Like, they've been together throughout it, where if you look and you're like, I thought Ronnie fished with this guy, and that's what I did, but I also fished with this guy in this tournament. And then, we're fishing with that guy, so the consistency of knowing who's in your boat when you launch, that's also a thing that you can lean on as well. It makes you fish cleaner. It makes you're not worried about the net man. Is this the first time this kid's netted fish before? No, you fish together. So that's a thing. Decker, go ahead, Lewis. And then Decker, jump in and do your final two.
Yeah, the other thing, Kyle, is you could also have sacrifice, from a community school, like myself and yourself. You could sacrifice, having a girlfriend and then a wife like yourself for, miserable mornings on Toledo Bend. So, it all comes down to that too.
So Lewis is sacrificing his love life for college fishing. Is that what I got out of that?
That precisely.
Okay. Hey, that's admirable.
Hey,
Pour one out for the brother. Pour one out.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't trade my life right now for anything. And I also would be one of those that if this list existed when I was in college, I wouldn't have deserved to be on there, and I wouldn't have cared that I wasn't on there because I wouldn't have thought. I mean, there was no way that I'd have been on there. So definitely different levels to it for sure. But no, you definitely have to make sacrifices. I mean, there's plenty of people in college that had to work full time just to go to college. I mean, there's
Totally.
and those might be some of the ones we're talking about that may not have done much in college, but to get a degree, they had to sacrifice on the other end, just to go to school. So
yeah, that was definitely more of a shot at myself than anything. But
well, you see it, Kyle. I don't learn electronically as good as I do in a classroom or with a textbook. And the second part of my junior year, my whole senior year, I took online classes so that I could fish in college, work with the video crew at ECU, travel for the Elite Series, and still do my education. And I saw the different struggles there, but there's different ways you adapt. And like Lewis said, you have to sacrifice, but when you want it, you can tell when somebody wants it. And so I know Chris has a couple other teams on his list that definitely want it, and they we'll see if they show up this year for it.
Oh yeah, one of them who I honestly probably should have let off with, and probably could have been unanimous, would be the team of Caden Profit and Kason Ragsdale from East Tennessee Baptist. They started the season 7th at the Harris Chain, finished 10th at Saginaw Bay. They didn't fish all of the Bassmaster stuff, but I mean, with 2 tournaments, they double qualified, and 2 vastly different fisheries. So I think just those 2 finishes alone tell you a lot about the caliber of team they are. Finished 20th at Winyah Bay, which is not an easy thing to do in the middle of August. I mean, Lewis will tell you all about it. I mean, that was a tough.
I won't. That was a shot. That was a shot.
Speaking of don't know how to catch him in August, Lewis, how about you?
It wasn't meant to be a shot. It was just simply looking at somebody who fished that tournament. But yeah, I mean,
ask
Winyah
Chase
Bay
about that one, not me.
Winyah Bay in August is not an easy place to do well at. So 20th at that national championship was fantastic. And then I believe it was before the Bass National Championship, but they won the MLF championship on Fort Gibson. Again, a totally different fishery so they've proven in several different venues that they can perform at a top level. So I wouldn't expect anything less from them this year. And then we've got the team from Bryan College. We got a Bryan College team. I think this is the first Bryan College team on the list for this year. Logan East and Rob Lindsay. And Logan fished with a couple different partners last year, ended up qualifying at the wild card. I think they finished let me see here, finished 3rd at that Logan Martin wild card, and then went on to finish 23rd at Winyah Bay. I honestly don't know a ton about Rob, but I think simply having, if they can keep that team together throughout the entire year, I think they'll be able to put together some top finishes, and you'll see them again at the national championship.
Yeah, because like you were saying,
Bryan has such a good network of anglers that I mean, it's hard not to see a Bryan College team end up in the top, making the final day cut at the national championship.
Yeah, like you were saying, Decker, it's hard to interpret some of these teams when they did fish. Logan fished with someone different, Rob fished with someone different. They've changed partners over the years, and now they're coming together, and you're like, you see a taste of success, and you wonder if that was Logan. You taste of success, and if that was all Rob, and now they're coming together. The ceiling for this team is very high. Yes. And I'd say that the floor isn't so low. It's a pretty solid floor.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. And like I said, the network of Bryan College anglers is very thick. So I think if it's not them, it'll be another Bryan College team or 2 Bryan College teams. You never kind of like Bethel, you never see Bryan College down for too long, or ever really. I mean,
maybe this
down
is the
here
year
for-
that the chip on their shoulder. This is the year that we give them, the chip. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that covers it for my my anglers here.
Lewis?
I got the Sams, Sam Hangy and Hosley from Auburn. Man, again, I'm tough with numbers, so unless they're my own or someone very close to me, but I think they had at least 2 top 10s last year. I believe it was Saginaw, and can somebody help me out here?
Them
Maybe
boys can
not.
catch smallmouth to be from Alabama.
They can, dude.
Top 10 in the Natty last year at St. Lawrence River too.
Yes. You got it, Ronnie?
I do
No?
not have it. No,
Okay.
I'm not. I'm the stat guy, but not on cue when I was not listening to what you said at the beginning. So I don't know.
No worries.
Mason's got a couple of papers over here that looks like Morse code that he's trying to
Yeah, I haven't.
West Virginia chicken scratch.
Yeah.
Either way, these guys, if you've been fishing college the last 2-3 years, you know these guys. Both of them are hammers, like you said, smallmouth hammers of all things from Auburn. Those guys catch them. Like Chris said earlier, we got Cherokee, or they got Cherokee coming up, I believe the second or third tournament. I would expect them to do really well there. And honestly, I just expect them boys to do well. So I'd be on the watch for that Auburn team. And then finally, this was a team that kind of flew under the radar for, I think, all of us. And I was looking at the list, like, man, we got to pick those guys out. Garrett Smith and Jeremy Dellinger from Lander. They're two of my buddies. So of course, that helped them from getting picked by me. But Garrett won Lake Norman last year with Avery Hammock, in a kind of a come from behind fashion. Those guys super consistent on Norman and the whole area. And then Jeremy, again, if you're a Carolina guy, you're in college, Jeremy, the dude is just model of consistency, fishes, I think, every day, and just always catching big spotted bass. So I look out for them guys. Again, like kind of like a Cherokee, or really anywhere. They fish everything all the time. So I believe this is both their first year at Lander.
Yeah, wasn't Garrett Smith at Erskine, or in that where he won? Yeah, he was with them.
I was gonna ask that too. It seems like Jeremy Dillinger's transferred schools like 7 times.
And the portal is open, and the NIL is live and active.
Yes, I know. Jeremy was at Catawba Valley.
Yes,
prior to.
And then I think Erskine and Lander. Yeah. And Garrett,
Coach Drew is putting together a team at Lander. I mean, he's carrying that momentum of an alumni making the classic with Colin Smith, and he had Britt Meyer's son there just a few years ago. Tyler Anderson's another great angler that's been at Lander, I believe. And so there's a couple guys that have now passed, and this new group kind of showed flares of, hey, I need to be at Lander, or hey, I've been here and now it's my time, my second half of my college time.
Absolutely. And I think you combine kind of the winning capabilities of Garrett. You saw that at Norman, versus the consistency. And like I said, again, I'll harp on this. In this area, when you talk about college guys, Jeremy is the model of consistency. That dude catches them everywhere all the time. You kind of mesh that together. They're going to be two to watch out for sure.
That's fantastic. I'm going to go ahead and get my 2 out of the right way real quick. The last 2 teams on my list, Stevie Mills and Brady Duncan from Carson Newman. We were talking about transfer portal. We saw Stevie Mills hit the portal last year and make his way from West Tennessee to East Tennessee. He's at Carson Newman, and he's made the bracket via Bethel with Tristan McCormick. So we had 2 opposite ends of the spectrum there. One really tall guy and one really short guy paired together, and they made the bracket. They did well their year of fishing. Last year, finding the consistency and the good finishes for Mills and Duncan, whether they were together or apart, it didn't quite match up. But the way I kind of, when I proposed this during the prospect call, a couple of weeks ago, I just thought about it's like when I go clean my boat and I put this chemical and I start scrubbing on it, and I put this chemical. If I put the wrong couple chemicals, this could be like a bomb. And for these guys, they have all the right recipes, and if they put it all together, they could explode this year and be a force, because they do have one in their backyard at Cherokee. They do have one that's familiar at the Harris chain, and then a couple of those river deals. I saw Stevie Mills do so well at the Potomac with Tristan McCormick in a big time event. And the James River is going to be, it's different, but it's got the recipes of a tidal body of water. So you just don't know how it goes. And once they catch fire in an event or two, maybe it takes an okay finish in the first one. They do well at home, and then they start to carry that through the rest of the season. But for those guys, it's like if they get all of everything functioning together, they could be a team that really, blows it up this season, and we could see them like come out of nowhere because we've seen sparks of it,
And that's an interesting analogy that you use there, because I know for a fact you don't clean your boat. So that's a really, really interesting analogy to use, but very accurate as well.
You got to use strong chemicals if you didn't clean your boat, because it's all clean now because I'm trying to get rid of it. And it's so beautiful, but I had definitely some guns formed from scrubbing and getting the boxes all clean. I had plastic stuck to the walls of everything, but my last team, and pardon my French for all those above the Mason-Dixon line, I'm going to mess this up big time, and those overseas that maybe have the same last name, but from Adrian College up there in Michigan, Matt Mosby and Owen Januski. I'm going to leave a couple consonants out there and just assume it's Januski, but I
think you nailed it.
Did I nail it? Hey,
gotta be close. Be close.
I'll say I pat myself on the back that I was at least, I got half the letters right. But these guys, it was the same kind of recipe, like we say with Bethel University teams. They didn't necessarily fish all the events. They fished a broken schedule last year. And so some of them were good, some of them were bad, but they got their job done and they qualified at their expertise. They qualified at Saginaw. They actually did so on all largemouth. They didn't go and fight the waves for smallmouth or make the long runs, into the next dimension like Lewis did. So they did it up at home, and then they did it in the championship. They went to an opposite body of water, which I will say up in Michigan, it's not all beautiful clear water smallmouth. They have those rivers like Wisconsin that are, hit or miss. They're not always the biggest fish, but, they're going to have to do the, what is it? Is it Grand Rapids? Is it Muskegon? Like all those different, the Grand River in Michigan, they have all those different rivers that kind of fish, and would show up maybe like a Winyah Bay, but they showed up well in that event. And I believe they top 12 the championship, and they top 12 Saginaw Bay. So I'm going to give some Adrian love there. And like you said earlier, Decker, with Hayden Scott and Griffin Fernandez kind of putting Adrian on the map in terms of high success across the country, I think that these guys could follow in their footsteps as Griffin left and as Hayden is making his way out and they go on to bigger and better things. I think that this could be the next regime of them. I think they're both sophomores, or they're both starting their junior year or something like that. But either way,
they've got a couple more years left, I believe.
Yeah. And I think they also had some solid high school finishes. Most of these teams will have to have solid high school finishes if they're at a scholarship school, something that attracts a coach to recruit them. It's not just because of their good looks or their high GPA. They probably had some good high school finishes. And so Mosby and Januski from Adrian, we'll see how they do, but they don't have any true northern ones necessarily this year. Are we back at Saginaw?
No,
we're not. Okay, so yeah, they don't have a true.
Unfortunately, I really like Saginaw Bay.
I'm glad
that we did that.
From a covering standpoint.
Yeah, Decker and I love Saginaw. That area is very fun. Bay City, stand up. That is
that was one of our favorite places to go over the past 2 years was Bay City. We really had a good time there.
I'm so traumatized from that.
Me too. Me too.
Well, yeah, the plus was we didn't have to fight the 7 and 8 footers that happened on the lake.
Decker and I were eating a nice calm lunch at a nice little brewery instead of getting splashed by or spearing waves out in the big lake.
Yeah, I remember in 2021 we went there and Hank was like, "Oh yeah, it's just like 1 footers, like everything's calm out there." And I just see just boats just straight up and down. I'm like, we are going to die.
Yeah.
So one thing about before we scoot away from Carson Newman, I do want to make one kind of honorable mention for that. They're Carson Newman has proven they're an up and coming program, and they have. I want to mention Ewing Minor because he he has chosen not to focus on the bass boat side. I believe he could do well on the bass boat side, just like Nolan did.
Who has now gone back and is avoiding bass boats now. So they're flipping the script.
But Ewing has really made his name in the kayak world in a very very short amount of time. So he probably deserves to be on this list, but doesn't fish as many of the bass boat stuff to qualify for the prospect list. So
who's he fishing with?
As far as
Carson Newman.
I'm not sure who his bass boat partner is.
I feel like there's another name at Carson Newman that it hasn't came together in bass events as much, but he's done well elsewhere. Is Kaz Anderson, and it's like if Kaz has the individual ability, so I feel like if a Kaz and a Ewing got together, like you said, we could see that all come together on the bass boat side for Ewing. But yeah, if you're in the minor family, I mean, you're probably just good at everything you do, honestly.
Yeah. So honorable mention there before we move away from Carson Newman, just because he's more kayak centric than bass boat.
Well,
I'll wrap us. Oh, go ahead.
I have on the roster. He's supposedly fishing all four, so
that's awesome.
Okay.
The minors never halfway do stuff; they whole way do stuff. For me to be able to keep that as censored as possible. Kyle, round us out.
Yeah, I'll wrap this up real quick. So, going back to Montevallo, another team that I would fully expect to do well this year is Cal Culpepper and Ryan Thomas. Cal has fished in college for 9 years now. I'm not sure what grade he's on, but it seems like he's been there forever. But he's made the championship every year he's fished. He has been the model of consistency, really, as far as making the championship and having some really good finishes mixed in there. This year he's going to fish with Ryan Thomas, who finished third, I believe, at Norfolk last year with Solomon Glenn. So that would be a team that, I think you take two individual parts. You match Cal, who's, like I said, been doing this for a minute, with Ryan, who's had some success as well. Definitely some good things to see there. And then to wrap us up, I got Caleb Brown and Chad Marzik? I don't know, another one of those more consonant than vowels, and it's not.
You can now see why we did not do any rhyme or reason for listing our four teams, except we saved the hard names for the end for both.
We just assume exactly right. Nobody's listening anymore, so we're gonna botch the names here at the end. But I mean, those guys talk. Speaking of Lander and the success they're starting to have with Drew. Being their head coach, obviously got a really good recruiting tool with Brandon Cobb being involved with the team as well. It's pretty much like the Deion Sanders recruiting pitch of college fishing. So they had a second place finish at Norfolk last year as well. So they've showed some promise with a few good finishes. But yeah, that's the end of our list. We have officially hit every angler on the list now. So now I want to make sure we actually did. I want to make sure we actually did real quick. Did we actually talk about the CCU guys?
Who's CCU? Coastal?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in our unanimous. We went through the three bracket teams.
I think Chris had a point because
I think we just kind of we mentioned they were there, but we didn't dive into.
Well, they did qualify at the wild card, and when their backs were against the wall for their home leg for the championship.
Ronnie mentioned him. I don't think anybody individually said anything about
I gave love. Y'all hate him. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I just want to add one more thing for them then, and then that's that the schedule at the back end really sets up for them to succeed once again. You've got the tidal waters of the James River, which might be arguably the best tidal fishery in the country right now. I mean, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that.
Sac Delta.
Yeah.
And then
I'd say it's like the St. Johns River being tidal.
I was gonna say
are we really doing it? We're like so far away from the actual mouth of it. But I can actually see the ocean at the James River before you hook a left at the Chickahominy.
Yeah.
And then you've got a Red River event that while it will be, I imagine it'll be pretty tough, that kind of sets up for what they like to do and what they did at Winyah Bay.
And it's actually at the good part of the Red River. It's in Natchitoches, a couple pools down from Shreveport. And so everyone knows Red River, they think Shreveport, but this is farther south. We had a college event there that Justin Cooper and Johnny Leday from Northeastern State in Louisiana, they won that. It was like 12 degrees, really cold, and they knocked it out. So that's actually a good part of the Red River that I hope that opens the eyes of the community that knows they have a good fishery, but the good publicity that may get, because Red River is a fishing area of the country. I'd love to go back there more, but we got to find a community that can host and have tournaments there. And so hopefully, yeah.
Hold on. I'm so mind blown right now. How is that pronounced?
Natchitoches?
That
and what's crazy is the same
how would you
city,
pronounce it?
I don't know, like Nacogdoches or something.
There is a city in Texas just across the border, basically like draw a straight line from Natchitoches to Nacogdoches, but that's what it's called in Texas. That's how you say it in Texas. Boom.
Yeah,
I had to find out that because of TV. I had to make sure I knew it. So. But yeah, that's a good point, Decker. Giving Coastal some love there to win a championship. You know, that's inconceivable how many things have to go right, and to do it at home on a place that you can stub your toe. Kudos to them, and that's why they're a part of our unanimous list for sure. And they just they had some tough people to go up against in the round one. I mean, when they're going up against Jackson Swisher and Seth Slanker 1-on-1 on a neutral body of water, I mean, that's why, and I'll say this to end my portion of it before we wrap up, is that's why the qualifying day for the bracket is so important. And it got canceled with weather this year, but having everyone, if we used to have the bracket at Chateaugue the week after the event at Chateaugue. So if you were top 5 or top 4 and you made the bracket, that's cool. We can use those standings because that's how you finished on that body of water. These guys made it from Winyah Bay and then go fish Greenwood, which is different. So it doesn't matter if you were team of the year. It doesn't matter if you're first, second, third at the championship. That doesn't carry over. It's a different body of water. So that qualifying day getting canceled this year, I don't know who it favored. Obviously, the overall number 1 seed ended up winning the bracket, but that practice day would have realigned it, and I would love to have seen how it played out with matchups wise, and then have the bracket re-bracketed. But it worked out the way it did, and you have to catch them no matter what, and Lewis did. But those guys having to face the Florida Gateway guys first round, I mean, that's a very, no one's a slacker in the bracket, but that was just like, dang, 2 guys who fish by themselves all the time and catch them. Now they got to fish against the guys who fish together as a team. That's kind of difficult.
In the roundabout way, Ronnie said he'd rather seen someone else win.
No, I'm saying that the Florida Gateway guys being the what was it, 3rd and 6th seeds in the bracket, that was like a, pull the wool over your eye. That's like a 14 seed in the NCAA tournament making it to the Elite Eight. You're like, they're better than that seed, and so it would have been interesting if they were like 1 and 2 seeds, because Seth and Lewis, well, early in the event, I think Jackson had the biggest weight on day 1 and Seth was right there. And then Lewis was 3rd in biggest weight. And then the next day, Lewis had the biggest weight and beat Jackson, who was just below Seth's weight. So those guys had top 3 weights every day they fished. It's just whether they faced the wrong guy or not.
You gotta forgive Chase. Chase has a hard time with he has a hard time with comprehension. We're working on it. We're trying to get him a little better, but that was the point was not well taken by Dingo over here.
Nobody's going to care about my take here, but I vote just no practice. Just pull freaking numbers out of a hat, roll it out. Let's go. That's a real test.
I could see it. Well, we need the storylines for TV, and I think it played out well on Fox. I'm so glad we did the shows.
I'm not mad at how it worked out.
Yeah, it worked out fine.
Yeah, I'd say
for sure.
Worked out great for him.
Well, fellas, I appreciate you joining us today on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast for the college prospect deal. The tournament starts this week. I mean, it's the Harris Chain, and these boys are they're going to put all the trash talk or all the pent-up energy into place for the first event this season at the Harris Chain. We obviously know, I don't know if we're trying to just recreate history and have it hit as good as it did last year. But I know Chase will be down there in the boat with my dad, who's a boat driver this year. You'll have to put up with him. You'll see where I get it from, all of the picking and messing around and stuff. But boys, any last thoughts about the college prospect list? I'm glad we did this. This is, man, we all owe it. I don't know about you, Decker, necessarily. This is how you got a part of Bass in terms of high level coverage and being able to work your way into the rankings there of more work. But all of us, I owe it to college. I thank Hank Weldon every time I see him that he, was placed into that position by Steve Bowman and the rest of the people. And then he carried it as good as he could carry that flag. I don't care how people talk about the waiting lists and all of the different drama but Hank Weldon elevated the college series by how much he cared about it. And I think that's why there's so much passion in our prospect list and how much effort we put into it, because he fished at Alabama, got the opportunity to lead the college series, led it with as much integrity and dignity as he could, and gave us guys, Marshall, Arkansas, UNC Charlotte, East Carolina, all of us had an opportunity to fish at a higher level than we deserved. And I have a job because of it. Kyle, I don't know if directly has a job because of it, but because he loved it, he ended up reaching out and getting a job. Chase, same thing. Lewis, hopefully you're starting day one of your job, at Eufaula in just 2 months, but we all owe it to Hank Weldon and the college series. So I'm so glad we got to dedicate a show to the prospect list of the up and comers that we could see, making a living and with a rod and reel in a few years.
Yeah. And the passion Hank shows translates to the anglers, and I don't know very many of the anglers themselves who don't take a tremendous amount of pride in fishing for their university and trying to represent themselves in the best way on the water. One thing I will say with the opening tournament coming up here is the Harris chain, while it didn't necessarily show out for the elite event last year, there's been several just absolutely historic college events happen on that
100%
on that body of water, whether it was Cole Sands and Connor DeMauro winning that national championship down there with that record-breaking weight, or the Messers putting together that 36-pound bag last year. I mean, it's the same time of year as last year's event, so I would expect to see some really giant bags weighed in. And I'm excited for them to take on the James River too. I just talked to
fishing so good
to Ed Loughran about it the other day for a preview story that'll run in Bass Times, and the Open showed just how good it could be last year, and I think you'll see the college anglers repeat it again this year. So those are the two events I'm most looking forward to this year, and I mean there's every opportunity for them to go out and catch some big bags and throw Cherokee in there, add the smallmouth element in there. So it's the regular season is pretty 4 distinct fisheries that they get to show their skills on, and then you've got the wild card at Lay Lake. So it'll be a fun season, I think.
No question. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. And like Ronnie said, just getting together and doing this, obviously making this prospect list and, publishing it on the website. It took a lot of work, and we did this another time, all 4 of us, or 5 of us, excuse me.
Less professionally than we did this time, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
Much less professionally.
No.
But it's something we've taken seriously, and like I said, we've enjoyed doing it, and I hope that it carries on, and hopefully, there's more people that get to listen to it and hear it, via the podcast that maybe might not have taken the time to look through the photo gallery.
And if you guys are an angler not on the list or on the list, you can email csansom@bassmaster.com with all your complaints. For this episode of the podcast, I'm Ronnie Moore. That's Kyle Jessie. Thank you for Chase Sansom, Louis Monetti, and Chris Decker joining us as our analysts and co-hosts today. College Prospect Show is in the books. Just later this week, we'll see day 1 at the Harris Chain for the college series. It should be a great one. Excited for year 2 of the Strike King Bassmaster College Series presented by Lewis.